All right, here we go with our section 3 notes talking about the middle colonies. If you don't know what the middle colonies were, there were 4 New England, there's going to be 4 middle, there'll be 5 southern. The 4 middle colonies that we'll talk about are New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Okay, those will be your 4 middle colonies, also known as the breadbasket of the colonies. So again, make sure you know those 4. You will be required to write those down on your test. Those aren't matching your multiple choice. On your test, when you have to tell me what colonies were part of what region, you have to write those down. So make sure you are familiar with those. Okay. So the middle colonies is what we'll be talking about today. In 1660, there were 2 groups of English colonies along the Atlantic coast at this time. Okay. You had the New England colonies in the north, which we just talked about in section 2. Okay. But also at this point in time, there are 2 other colonies that have been established in the south, Virginia, where they were the first colony to be established with Jamestown. But also at this point in time, Maryland has been settled as well. We'll talk about in section 3 how Maryland actually comes about. Okay. But in 1660, Maryland is already there. Okay. But we'll talk about them in section 3 because they are part of the southern colonies. Okay. Located in between the New England colonies and these southern colonies, Virginia and Maryland, was a small area called New Netherland. Okay, the Dutch. Sorry, my dog just went crazy. The Dutch had settled in this area along the Hudson River, and they controlled that area at this point in time. So we'll talk a little bit about the Dutch and their area here. I'll show you a map. Okay, so here's the New England colonies over here. You see part of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island would be up here, over here, and New Hampshire up here. Then you've got down below here, Virginia, Maryland, and those places. Okay, so here's the Hudson River, and this was known as New Netherland. So they controlled all this, plus a little part of this river here. I think that's the Delaware River right there. Okay, so the Dutch controlled all of that, and that area was called New Netherland. Their main settlement was known as New Amsterdam, which is on the very tip of Manhattan Island, or also called Long Island. Okay, if you've ever been to New York or been to New York City, you know that terminology. Okay, the Dutch West India Company had kind of taken over control of New Netherland. New Amsterdam had become a huge trading port, and they were making a lot of money in the 1660s. To try and get more people to New Netherland, the Dutch West India Company is going to start offering large tracts of land to anyone that can bring 50 settlers to work. So if you were wealthy enough and you could round up 50 people to work, you could come to New Netherland. You'd be given a big chunk of land, and those 50 people would work for you on that land. Okay. Well, these large landowners or people who brought these 50 settlers were called patroons. Okay, and a patroon kind of acted like a king. They controlled their large tract of land. They had their own people that worked for them. They had basically their own government, their own laws, everything. They controlled their one section of land. So it's kind of like the small kingdoms throughout Europe. Back in the day, each kingdom had their own castle and their peasants and their serfs, and I'm not going to get into the whole hierarchy of the feudal system, but there's kind of the same idea here in the middle 1600s. So the success that the Dutch is having does not go unnoticed. The English decide that they want control of New Netherland because it is such a large trading port, and because they are making a lot of money. They want that area. Plus, they say that John Cabot's expedition way back in the 1400s gave England claims to these lands because he kind of explored the Atlantic coast on his expedition. So they say because of that, 200 years before, they have claims to these lands. So King Charles is going to send a naval fleet to the port at New Amsterdam, and he's going to attack the city. Basically, they're going to come in, they're going to take over New Netherland. Well, the governor of New Netherland, his name was Peter Stuyvesant, sees this fleet coming, realizes he has no chance at defeating the English, and so he just he gives up without a fight and turns New Netherland and New Amsterdam over to King Charles and the English. King Charles is then going to give that section of land to his brother, who is the Duke of York. He's going to rename it New York. And we know today that New Amsterdam will eventually become New York City. I don't know if any of you have ever been to New York City, but originally it started as New Amsterdam. And there's the Duke of York, who will rename the section that they got from the Dutch. He'll call it New York in 1664. And you don't have to know the dates for these colonies that they're established. I just put them on there so you can see. All right, so New Jersey. Shortly after the English take control of New York, the Duke of York is going to give some of that land to two of his friends, Lord John Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. He's going to give them the land between the Hudson and the Delaware rivers. They're going to name it New Jersey after a small island in the English Channel called Jersey, which is where George Carteret was born. So they'll rename this section of land New Jersey. And before I go on, I gotta throw this in here. When we talk about these colonies, there were basically three types of colonies, English colonies, when they were established. You could have a royal colony, which was under control of the king himself. He had control of everything. You had proprietary colonies, which was a section of land that was given to a group or a person, and that person controlled that whole section of land. Like New Jersey was a proprietary colony controlled by Berkeley and Carteret. Jamestown was, before I get to that, the third type of colony was a charter colony. So the king gave a group a charter. They could go and establish a settlement on this section of land. And really the charter colonies were the most independent from the king, unlike the other two. Okay, Jamestown starts as a charter colony. The Virginia Company got this charter from the king, and they established Jamestown. Well, eventually, they're not making enough money, and so the king takes over Jamestown and makes it a royal colony. So now he has the complete say in what goes on at Jamestown. Okay, so there's these three types of colonies: a royal colony, proprietary, or a charter colony. New Jersey is a proprietary colony under control of Berkeley and Carteret. To get more people to come live in New Jersey, they're going to promise representative government. They'll promise freedom of religion. And one thing that was not common, but that they will promise in New Jersey was trial by jury. Okay, so try to get more people there. We'll have representative government. You'll be allowed to vote, worship however you want. If you get in trouble, there'll be a trial by jury. Okay, it's not just under control of one person, but your peers will have a say in your trial. So that did attract more and more people to come and live in present day New Jersey. Oh, there's the two, Berkeley and Carteret. And again, I don't know why my animations are all messed up. They're supposed to pop up earlier than that, but try to figure that out later. All right, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania will be established in 1682. Okay, it's founded by a man named William Penn as a safe haven for a group known as the Quakers. He's going to be given this land from King Charles because King Charles owed Penn's father money, or he was in debt to Penn's father. Well, Penn's father had passed away, And so he gives this land to William Penn, repaying that debt. And so Penn will call it Pennsylvania, which means Penn's Woods. It was a highly wooded area, and he will set up his settlement in present day Pennsylvania. He said it was a religious sanctuary for Quakers, Quakers were a group of pacifists, which means they don't believe in physical violence or war or fighting. They believed that all people were equal. It didn't matter your color. If you were Native American, if you were from a different country, all people were created equal, and everybody had what they called an inner light. It didn't matter how you worshiped, as long as that inner light was on, and you were doing good deeds and following God's will, then you were okay. Penn will oversee and design the building of the city of Philadelphia, which will eventually thrive and grow. It will become one of the largest cities in the Middle Colonies. Eventually, it'll become one of the largest cities in all of the colonies. Okay? But it was designed and built by Penn, or oversaw. He oversaw the building of the city of Philadelphia. If you don't know the motto of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, was the motto given to it. Penn and the Quakers believed that all the land belonged to the Native Americans because they were there first. This is one of the few individuals who believes that. He says that if settlers want a section of land and there's Native Americans there, then settlers should pay for that land. They don't have the right to just remove the Native Americans or kick them off their land, because it's not theirs. It's the Native Americans. So if you want that land, pay for it. If they don't want to sell it, then find somewhere else. So not a bad idea, especially with all the problems that are going to come about with the Native Americans when we just start to kick them off their land rather than pay them for their land. So there's William Penn. You may recognize him from the Quaker oatmeal box or jar. And last is Delaware. Okay. Founded by Peter Minuit. Originally, people from Sweden were in this section. William Penn actually had control of these counties in southern Pennsylvania. Well, he knew the Swedish were living there. He'll eventually allow them to kind of set up their own government and form what we will eventually know as Delaware. However, it will still be under control of the Pennsylvania government for many, many years. But eventually it will become its own colony called Delaware. Like I said, it was at first it was New Sweden. Okay. Eventually the Dutch will take it over. Okay. And then when Pennsylvania is established, obviously it will become part of the English colonies, and we'll call it Delaware. So, all right, so there's your Middle Colonies notes. Again, make sure that you're familiar with what colonies go with what section for your test. And section 4, we'll talk about the southern colonies. There'll be 5 of those. Make sure you are familiar with those as well.